Offer valid on standard browsers. U.S. only.
When I heard about Date My Age, I thought, I gotta check that out. I mean, I'm getting older, sure, but I don't feel like I'm done with, the fun parts of life, like connection and desire, excitement. You don't really find those things at the grocery store or the doctor's office, so I went online. Date My Age made dating an adventure. It gave me a chance to feel like a teenager again. The thrill of seeing someone new and saying, wow. I could send a spicy gift, start a video chat, or just message my compliments to a beautiful woman.
Whether you love, or just like to look, the fun is waiting for you at Date My Age.
Sure, I was skeptical, but Date My Age is safe, secure, and fun.
Get 60% off when you join at datemyage.com today. That's datemyage.com to connect with thousands of singles worldwide. datemyage.com.
You're listening to Missing Persons, brought to you by AbJack Entertainment. Be sure to check out some of the other great true crime podcasts from this network, including The Murder in My Family, DNA ID, Beyond Bizarre True Crime, Zodiac Speaking, Scene of the Crime, 3 Men and a Mystery, and All Things Crime. All of these podcasts are available for you to binge on right now, wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe where you're listening to this podcast so you don't miss an episode.
The views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast do not necessarily represent those of the podcast, its creators, or sponsors. If you would like to discuss a missing persons case on this podcast, please be sure to visit missingpersonspodcast.net. This episode may contain unsettling or disturbing subject matter. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Missing Persons, a podcast dedicated to spreading the word about people who have vanished under mysterious or unexplained circumstances, and the family members who are looking for answers. I'm Jess Betancourt.
And I'm Mike Morford. Together we created this podcast to help give a voice to people who continue to search for their missing loved ones, in some cases even after decades have gone by. In each episode, you'll hear from Jess giving listeners the backstory and the basic facts of the disappearance.
Then Mike will speak with someone who's intimately connected to the missing person, and his guest will share their story with us.
Please stay tuned at the conclusion of this episode to hear about our Patreon program and our commitment to help find people who have gone missing. We'll also share with you where you can find more information and how you can join our team and help our efforts. You'll get recommendations for other podcasts we think you'll enjoy, and more.
So sit back and enjoy this episode, and who knows, maybe you can help us find someone who's missing. Episode 39, Christopher Douthat. In 2013, Christopher Ray Douthat was 24 years old and living and working in Franklin County, Virginia. Chris was native to this region, having grown up in the Burnt Chimney area of Franklin County outside Roanoke, with his mom, Mary Douthat Sunk, who was our guest today, and Chris's younger brother, Michael. His father died in 2010, but Chris was very close with both his mom and his brother. Chris was a normal guy who, his mom says, loved hunting and fishing and outdoorsy activities. He also had a passion for fixing up cars and was a trained mechanic. But in 2013, he didn't have a car of his own and was working not as a mechanic but as a roofer. He had just moved back in with his mother temporarily after ending a tumultuous relationship with his longtime girlfriend. We'll address that relationship further in a little bit. So, Chris was staying with his mom for a few days after moving out of the home he shared with his girlfriend, Shayna, and he had been living with a neighbor for a time as well. On the morning of October 25th, Mary dropped him at work at Vinton Roofing on East Washington Avenue in Roanoke around 6:30 or 7. He worked at a job site at Ashley Plantation in Douthat County and got off early at 1:30. After the workers returned to Roanoke, Chris picked up his paycheck at the Vinton Roofing main office. Then he and a coworker who didn't drive got one of the coworker's relatives to pick the two up and drive them to the Vinton Kroger on Hardy Road to cash their paychecks. This was done at 3:19 p.m. Chris is visible on the store's security footage. The two men were then dropped off at Chap's Tavern in the 800 block of Campbell Avenue Southeast in Roanoke around 3:30. It's not really clear whether Chris actually was a patron at Chap's Tavern that day. The next known event in the timeline of his day is 2 phone calls he made, one at 4:12 p.m. and one at 4:14 p.m. One of these calls, or both, may have been attempts to arrange a ride for himself. At 4:22, a woman called his phone. This was a friend of Chris's who was supposed to give him a ride that afternoon. Chris called her back at 4:25 and said he was at Garden City Boulevard and Riverland Road in southeast Roanoke. According to Virginia State Police Special Agent Douglas Hubert, Chris had walked to this location from Chap's Tavern via 9th Street. The plan was that Chris would meet his friend at the Food Lion on Bennington Street, about 2.4 miles walk from Chap's. Cell phone data gathered by police indicates that Chris was on the phone with this woman friend on 9th Street within a half mile of the Food Lion when he said to her suddenly, "Hang on, there's someone I know," and hung up. He may have told his friend that the person he knew was driving a truck. We can't be sure. Unfortunately, Chris's phone was a flip phone, not a smartphone, and the GPS tracking only worked when the phone was in use. Where Chris went after he hung up is unknown, and police have not been able to trace his phone since that time. They also haven't been able to find anyone who saw Chris near the Food Lion that day, and the store's surveillance system was out of order. Chris's friend arrived at the Food Lion parking lot about 20 minutes later, around 5 p.m. She didn't see Chris anywhere. She called and texted him a number of times, as many as 10 times, she said, and never got any response. Chris was never seen again. There has been no activity on his bank account, he never contacted his family, and no trace of him has ever been found. Mary filed a missing persons report on her son Chris to the Vinton police on November 9th. Police Detective Sergeant James Testerman, who was in charge of the investigation for a time, stated that certain elements of Chris's disappearance are suspicious, and that police believe foul play may have been involved. There were some reasons that police feared Chris might have been harmed by someone. A few months earlier, on February 3rd, 2013, Chris and his girlfriend Shayna were the victims of a home invasion. Shayna was pregnant with the couple's twins at the time. 2 brothers, John Michael Smars and Derek Smars, broke into their Kingston Road trailer and attacked them. Chris and Shayna were both injured, sustaining cuts and bruises. Chris and Shayna knew these brothers, the Smarses, and were able to identify them to police. This, according to the Roanoke Times. According to the investigation report by the Franklin County Sheriff's Office, Derek Smars had been drinking the night of February 3rd at the Kingston Road home of Christopher Ray Douthat and Shayna Seebeck when he began fighting with Douthat. They called a truce, and the couple drove Smars back to his house, the report said. But about 2 a.m., Douthat and Seebeck were awakened by 2 men who broke in, assaulted them, and fled, leaving them with cuts and bruises. In their testimony at Smars's trial, Douthat and Seebeck identified Derek Smars as one of the attackers. Smars's brother, John Michael Smars, has also been charged in the incident and is scheduled to go to trial next week. So, Chris had testified at the trial of this guy, Derek Smars, who got drunk and fought with Chris, went home, and then broke into his home in the middle of the night to continue the fight. Chris's testimony was instrumental in obtaining Derek's conviction. He was found guilty, and the judge sentenced him to a 10-month detention and diversion program, a military-style incarceration that's designed to kick your butt. The judge wanted to teach Derek a lesson about drinking and being violent toward pregnant women, but the sentence indicates that he didn't feel that Derek was super dangerous. John Michael would not be so lucky. He skipped town and failed to show up for a court hearing on September 13th on his assault and breaking and entering charges. A warrant was issued for his arrest. He was captured a month later on October 12th in Florida. He sat in jail awaiting trial on charges that now included failure to appear. Why does all this matter? Because Chris Douthat was slated to testify at John Michael's trial. It was scheduled to take place the week after Chris vanished. Because he was MIA, he was not available to serve as the key witness against John Michael, who ended up entering an Alford plea, where he admitted the evidence against him was sufficient to convict, but he did not admit guilt. John Michael got only 24 months suspended time for the misdemeanor assault and battery charge, but he also had to face charges on the failure to appear. Remember, he had fled the state for Florida and missed a court hearing. He pled guilty to this charge and received a year in prison plus 9 months for violating parole. Oddly, even though Chris Douthat went missing under circumstances that police acknowledged were suspicious, Vinton Detective Sergeant J.M. Testerman has said Chris's disappearance doesn't seem to be related to his differences with the Smars brothers. Who else could have had it out for Chris? It's no secret that Chris and his ex-girlfriend, Shayna Seebeck, had a very strained relationship at the time he disappeared. The two had met in 2012 and their relationship moved fast. They moved in together, and in 2013, Shayna gave birth to their twins. But in August of 2013, one of the twins, David, died of SIDS at just a few months old, and Shayna and Chris fell apart. Shayna told WFXR that the two fell apart after David died. They started fighting, and eventually the two had protection orders issued on each other. Chris moved out, first staying with a neighbor and then his mom. Shayna had said that the two started fighting over custody just to spite each other. In fact, a custody hearing in Franklin County Court was scheduled for 3 days after Chris's disappearance on Monday, October 28th. Chris did not show up for the hearing, even though he was eager to fight for custody of his daughter. Despite all the drama in their relationship, Shayna said in an interview that she and Chris loved each other and that Chris was a great guy and an amazing person. She also said that he didn't have bad blood with anyone. The Smars assault was the only issue he had with anyone that she knew of. She said she has heard rumors about someone killing Chris and putting him in a lake, but she has no idea who. Reeling from the death of her infant son and the deterioration of her relationship, Shayna descended into drugs and was unable to care for her and Chris's daughter, David's twin sister. She ended up giving her daughter up for adoption. She eventually pleaded guilty to possession of heroin and meth. She was ordered into a drug treatment program. Mary, Chris's mom, is not in touch with Shayna. She is suspicious of Chris's ex and her motives. So, to recap, Chris disappeared after indicating on the phone that he was heading over to talk to somebody he knew. No trace of him has ever been found. He had court dates the following week for both the custody issue and his testimony in the trial of John Michael Smars. The Vinton Police Department, which took over the initial missing persons report, turned the case over to the Virginia State Police in January of 2018. This was because there were a number of different jurisdictions involved, and it was deemed better to have one agency handle the whole case. Special Agent Douglas Hubert has plunged into the investigation, interviewing upwards of 30 people and following up on leads, tips, and rumors. One of these included executing a search warrant for Chris's Facebook account. This was because a woman had posted a comment that said, in effect, that Chris is dead and his body is in Philpott Lake, something Mary had also heard from another tipster. Investigators tracked down and interviewed this woman who posted on Facebook. If anything came from this, we don't know. Special Agent Hubert told WDBJ7.com in 2019, "We have a pool of persons of interest in this case, and we've spent a lot of time putting their locations to show that they're in the path of Christopher Douthat. People don't go missing from strangers, very rarely. It's not a TV show or anything like that. At this point, we're working this case pretty significantly, and we're working it as a homicide. And we're working it rapidly but methodically." Investigators clearly believe that Chris knew the person or persons who had a hand in his disappearance and that they killed him. In 2019, the Virginia State Police put up billboards in Roanoke and Franklin counties to raise awareness of the Chris Douthat case. The billboards ask anyone with information about the disappearance of Christopher Douthat to contact state police. Chris's mom, Mary, has become a very vocal advocate for her son's case. And Michael Douthat, Chris's brother, says he is constantly handing out his brother's missing person flyers. "I put them up everywhere I go," he said. "It doesn't matter where, North Carolina, Northern Virginia. I give them to any place that will put one up." It's hard for the family to hear that police are working Chris's case as a homicide, a classification that means that police have evidentiary reasons to believe that it is not simply a missing persons case. "I don't want to think my brother's dead," Michael said. "It's so horrible to think that, but at this point, that's what it's looking like." When last seen, Chris Douthat was wearing a gray hooded sweatshirt with a Snap-on Tools logo on the front, khaki pants, white shoes, and a brown baseball cap. He has a tribal tattoo on his right arm. He is 5 foot 8 inches tall and 170 pounds. He has short dark hair, blue eyes, and is a smoker. Anyone with information about his disappearance can call Virginia State Police at 1-800-542-5959. Ask to be directed to Special Agent Douglas Hubert. Mike Morford sat down to talk with Mary Sunk, Chris's mom, about her son's case. That conversation is coming up after a word from our sponsors.
Hi, Mary, and welcome to Missing Persons. I want to thank you for discussing your son Christopher's case with us.
Thank you. So let me just jump head first right into this thing. So Christopher went missing on October 25th, 2013. And I'm never going to forget that day for as long as I'm here on this earth. Because it was a day that seemed completely normal. It was a totally normal day, at least so I thought. I drove him to his job that morning. He didn't have a way to get to work at the time because he didn't have a car. And that's because, the reason for that is because he had just ended a relationship with a girl. This girl, Christopher, had cut off the relationship. He ended it. But her name is Shayna Seabat. And this girl is bad news, let me tell you. Nothing but bad news. But he didn't have an automobile, a car, because he had just ended that relationship. So on his way to work that morning, as I was driving him, we were talking, we started laughing, and we were singing to the songs on the radio.
Okay, just a normal routine day.
Yeah, just a normal routine day. And so I got him there to his place of work, his job, and he said he loved me and would see me late. And that was the last time I ever heard from him.
He had been in a relationship with a girl. He broke up. Things were rocky between them, but he was finally broken up with her. He was working at this job as a roofer. Is that correct?
That is correct.
How long had he been working as a roofer there at that job?
Let's see. He had went back, because he went missing October the 25th, 2013. It was close, almost, I'm going to say close to a year, because Christopher was an automobile mechanic. That was one of his passions, and he loved working on cars. But this position for roofing had come up where he could have more money, more of an income. So he would still do from time to time if people needed him to work on their automobiles, he would do that on the side as a side job. And he had been certified as a mechanic repairman, by the way. And if he was still here, he might own his own shop.
Yeah, was that something that he hoped to do one day, have his own shop?
Yeah.
You mentioned you dropped off your son that day. You were singing. Everything seemed fine. Nothing was unusual. You never saw your son again. What happened the rest of the day, and when did you find out that he was missing and something was wrong?
What happened was he had a friend that was going to pick him up when he got off from work. They had made plans, okay? This friend was going to pick him up. She was going to bring him home so they could, see me and see my dad. All right, when he got off from work, and I'm going by the timeline, what they had told me. When he got off from work, he had went up to the Kroger's in Vinton and had cashed his paycheck. Because when they went there to Kroger's, it showed him, on camera there cashing his check. From there, one of his co-workers and the co-worker's mom, they had dropped Christopher off there in Southeast at Chap's Tavern. When he left Chap's Tavern, the friend he was going to meet over at the food line off of Bennington and Southeast. So he was walking on foot, and he left Chap's on foot. So he was walking, okay? And he had called and he had told the friend that he was walking and he was on his way over to that food line. They told Christopher, okay. All right, he said, well, hold on for a minute. Said there's somebody that's pulling up in a truck that I know that I haven't seen in a long time. That was the last time that he called out on his phone, because at the time he didn't have like these iPhones now. It was just, sort of like a flip phone. So when the friend arrived at Food Line, he was nowhere in sight. And he hung up the call, and she tried to text and call him multiple times, but was unable to reach him. And that was the last time anybody had heard from him. So by Sunday, I knew in my heart as a mom that something wasn't right. Because that following Monday is when he was supposed to go to court and testify, where these two brothers had broke into him and that girl's trailer back in January of that year. And so I went, I think it was that following Monday, and I went to the sheriff's department and tried to file a missing report, because I said there's no freaking way he wouldn't answer his phone, because he was glued to that, to his phone. But they said I had to wait. And the reason they said I had to wait was because since he was 24, he's an adult, he's not under 18. They said, well, maybe he took off for the weekend or something to get himself, together about this upcoming case. And I said, if that were true, he would have tried to contact me or his brother some kind of way and would say to us, I can't tell you where I'm at, but I'm just calling to let you know that I'm safe and I'm sound. And I told him, I said, he knew he had that court date Monday. There is no way that he would have left and not come to court. And I had done got approved from work to be with him, because I was going to go, to court with him to support him and everything. So they said, well, you need to wait 5 to 7 days before you can file a missing, person's report because of his age. And a sheriff's department staff member told me, don't worry about the situation, and said he will probably call, but the phone call never came. I went back up there and said, they said I had to go to the Vinton police to file a missing report, since he went missing over there off of Bennington and Southeast.
So you waited the time to do the report, but then you had to go to a different police location to file the report once you did.
Yes. because that's where he went missing. And I asked them, I said, well, can't I go ahead and file a missing report with you all too? Because I said, even though he went missing over there in that area, he is a resident of Franklin County. I said that would be, that would be helpful, because if someone around the different areas in Franklin County, maybe they have possibly seen him, maybe they've heard, something. But they told me, they said, no, if they want our help, we can help them, but that's where you have to go and handle the missing persons report.
So you did that, you did what they asked, and you filed it with the other police department.
Yes. And I feel the sheriffs just didn't want to handle it, because the sheriffs over here have a huge caseload. And they don't want another huge case to deal with, so they tried to push it off on someone else.
Well, and you're thinking maybe they just didn't want the extra work.
That's what I'm thinking. They didn't want the extra work.
And if we can, let's back up a second. So the day he went missing, he got off work early. He made arrangements to go see this friend and at the food line, and he talked to him on the phone, and your son said, hey, I see this guy in this truck. I haven't seen him in a long time. Did he tell the friend on the phone who was driving the truck or who the friend was?
Nope, sure didn't. Didn't say anything. Because after he, had told the friend that, he said, I'll be waiting out here in the front over here at the food line parking lot. I'm going to be talking to them for a few minutes while I'm waiting on you to get here. And when they got there, see, like I said, they tried to call him. They tried to text him on his phone. No response. Well, they went inside the food line. They thought, well, maybe he decided, to go in there. They went in there. They didn't see him. And at the time, there was like a Dollar General store and something like, it wasn't Blockbuster, but it was something like a Blockbuster movie place that they had there, and they went in both those places just to see maybe if he had walked in there, but he hadn't. So they waited and waited for a good while, but he was just gone. And see, the thing about it too, all these places usually have the tapes in their store where they can see from inside what's going on in the store, and the cameras have them fixed where they can see outside in the parking lot. But when they went there, the Testerman at the time, he was the one at Benton that took over the case, okay, when it was filed. He went there to talk to him to see by chance if he could look at the cameras and go back and look at the tapes. Well, he couldn't see anything because the manager told him, he said the tapes weren't working that day.
So they missed out on any chance of seeing any surveillance.
That's right.
Were there any witnesses? Did they find anyone that saw Chris talking to this person that had pulled up?
No. Not a witness. And it's just, stuff just isn't adding up. And my thought to them, I said, well, if the tapes would have been working that day, I'm sure they could, if that truck was out there in that food line parking lot, it would have showed Christopher, standing there or talking to him, and maybe at least they could have got one of the license plates where they could have called the tag in to see, who that was registered and belonged to.
Sure. Or at least even get a color or see what kind of truck it is to start from there, but they didn't have anything. How long from the time that Chris hung up with the friend and said, "I'll be out here waiting for you," until the friend got there, how much time had passed?
I only think it was, if my memory is correct, I'm going to say about 20 minutes, because the friend, when he talked to her and was telling her, that's where he was walking, that's where he was headed and stuff, she said, "I'm on my way," said, "I'm almost there." And that's when he told her, said, "I'll be outside waiting." And that's when, he had told her that truck had pulled up. So I'm going to say it wasn't but about 15 or 20 minutes.
So it's in that short time that Christopher went missing, and that truck could have something to do with it, or could have information that holds a key to what happened.
That's what I'm thinking. I don't know if you know or not, but they got another unsolved missing person case, Heather Hodges in Franklin County, where I reside, and they got lots of unsolved crimes, so they probably got super duper nervous when they heard about Christopher, and I guess wanted to push him off onto another person or another department.
Yeah. And so when Chris first went missing, did your mind go to right away thinking that his ex-girlfriend, Shayna, had anything to do with it? Did you start thinking that right away?
Oh, yeah. That was the first thought that came into my mind. I knew in my heart, and I've always told them that, that Shayna Seaback had something to do with it. She's deplorable. And she used to get Christopher in a lot of hot water. And I won't go into too many details about the messes she used to get him tied up in, but there was a lot. And there's something very odd about all this. Listen, get this, buddy. Listen, buddy. So that Monday, as I said before, that Monday, Christopher was supposed to, testify, okay? And he was going to testify in a assault case. And he was the key witness in the assault case. And then after that, he was going to fight for custody of his young daughter, which he loved dearly. He loved her very much and would have never left her. So I think because he was the main key witness in that assault case, along with the fact he was going to get custody of his child, and believe me, he would have got custody had it went to the courts, because as I said, Shayna Seaback is just totally bad news.
How long was Christopher dating? Was he together with Shayna?
It was going on close to about, I'm going to say almost 2 years. Because, see, they had twins. And the little boy, he passed away in August the 8th of 2013. But it was just getting to be a terrible, rocky relationship. And he ended it. So, like I said, when they first asked me and talked to me about it, I said, I just know in my heart that she had something to do with it. And she knows something, but won't say anything.
Yeah. Now, Christopher and Shayna had some kind of protective orders in place against each other. Had there been violence in the past?
Well, I'm going to tell you about that. This was about, I'm going to say, anywhere from 3 to 5 months before he went missing. And this was on a Saturday. And he had called me and he said, Mom, I need for you to come over to the house. And I said, what's going on? And he said, just please come over here. I want you to see what's happened. And he told me, he said, I'm so upset because he said, Shay has just went off. Because he said, I'm getting ready to call the county police, sheriff's office, and tell them to come down here. So I went over there. She turned the whole place upside down. And Christopher had packed the stuff. He was getting in the van to get ready to leave. She went out there. She got upset. She didn't want him to leave. She jumped up on the hood. She broke out the windshield in the front. She went through the trailer. She had took pictures off the wall. She had threw them down, broke them, took dishes, thrown them down, and broke them. So, and Christopher was just as calm could be. So he called. Well, they took him instead of her. And then I had to go up there and pick him up. And she even scratched, kicked, and bit Christopher, and he was getting smacked by her. So I went up there and picked him up. So both of them, did that, took those protective orders out against each other.
So it was a real mess, it sounds like.
It was a real mess. And I went to court with him about that. And, of course, it was closed session and stuff. And when it was time, they called me in there because they just wanted to ask me questions about what I had seen. And I was honest with them. I told them, I said, he called me. And he wanted me to come over there before he called the county sheriff's department because he wanted me to see what she had done. And when it was over with and everything, Christopher wasn't charged with any, domestic violence or anything like that. Oh. Because I think what happened, like I said, it was closed session and I couldn't go in there until they called my name. And my understanding was, Shay would change her story 2 or 3 different times. So they're like, we can't go by anything she's saying. Sure. Because she was trying to say, that Christopher had been mean to her and Christopher had scratched her and all this stuff. And they asked me, they said, when you went over there, did you see any scratches or bruises on her? And I told them, I said, no, there wasn't anything on her. But, Christopher did have some scratches and stuff on him.
Yeah. Now, you made no secret. You told the police right away that you thought she had something to do with it. Did the police talk to Shayna? And if so, was she cooperative? What did she have to say?
Well, she went there because Chesterman at the time, he's no longer there. But he was the one at Denton that was over the case. She went in, he had talked to her. They gave her a lie detector test. They said she passed it, that she wasn't hiding anything. But, I've always heard and I've always been, told you can't always go by those lie detector tests. if you understand what I'm trying to say. And now Douglas Hubert at the Virginia State Police Department is the one that is heading Christopher's case. He's had it now going on close, I'm going to say, about 3 years, okay? And he's tried to talk to her, but she don't want to talk to him because every time he tried to reach out to her to talk to her, she says, I'm not going to talk without a lawyer.
Sure.
So she won't talk. And this was a Benton police. She took a lie detector, polygraph test. But she could have manipulated that doggone test.
Yeah.
And now it's in the state cops, and the state boys say she's not cooperative at all, and she's extremely suspicious.
Sure. And just looking at other people too, the timing of, Christopher having to testify at this trial, is there any possibility, or did the police look into that maybe the people he was testifying against may have been mad because he was going to testify and that they may have had something to do with it?
Yes. Those S'mores brothers.
And were they cooperative? Did they answer questions?
You know what? I think they may have probably answered some. Because I do know, that they did talk to them.
Yeah, because the timing definitely, as many problems as there were between Christopher and Shayna, it also looks kind of suspicious, the timing that he's about to testify against these brothers and then he goes missing. So I think it would be smart for the police to just at least check with them and see if they maybe had a grudge or were angry that he was going to testify and if they could have something to do with it as well.
Yep. And like I said, I think they probably talked to them, but they are jailbirds. I think one is currently in a jail cell as we speak.
Yeah. So not real law-abiding citizens.
Cooperative. No.
Yeah. After Chris went missing, did police did you try to get maybe your hands on the phone records of Chris's phones to see if there were any clues, if they could track people he talked to? Do you know if that was done?
Yes, they did file the petition or whatever they have to do to get, permission to look at his cell phone records.
And do you know if anything interesting was found or anything that they considered maybe connected to the case was found in those records?
Well, yes, the state boys got some information, but just some, because the cell phone companies dumped a lot of information.
It's a lot of stuff that they would have to comb through to really, sort through. Plus, you're saying, and when you say dumped, you mean they deleted a lot of the information?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe there's something there or some kind of clue, but since a lot of it was deleted, that there's no way to check that stuff out.
That's right, and yes, but they definitely should have combed through it.
Yeah. Were there any organized searches done for your son? Any kind of group searches or dog searches, anything like that?
No, there was no dog search, no group searches or anything like that. It was just posters that went up, missing posters about him. Some of the local news stations came and I talked to them and we did an interview and they had that, on the TV stations and stuff about what had happened, and showed a picture of him and what he, looked like and what he was last seen wearing. And basically that was, about that. And then one time it was really weird. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with Philpott Dam and Philpott Lake and stuff, but there was a weird phone call when my dad was living that he got, and somebody said, "Are you Christopher's granddad?" And he told him yes, and they said, "Well, your grandson, I know where he's at. I've heard that he's up in the Philpott Dam." Well, that got, and see, when they called from a number where it couldn't be traceable, and you don't know who it was that made the call. But that was passed on to the police, too. They didn't do a search or anything because they said, Philpott Dam and Philpott Lake, it's so many areas to cover. And they did, check it out, but they said it was to no avail.
Sure.
And it was just, they just couldn't send dogs and all that stuff up there.
Well,
but my son Michael, well, actually, him and two of his friends went looking around Philpott Lake one time, but that's it.
Yeah.
And my son Michael and a couple of his friends going to Philpott, because it got around that they were saying Christopher was buried or he was inside Philpott Lake. And that's the lake it's a reservoir of water near Martinsville, Virginia, about 30 minutes away from Rocky Mount, Franklin County.
It's got to be tough for you to hear all those terrible rumors and things like that.
It is. It really is, because, you just want closure. That's all you want. You want to find out what's happened.
Sure. It's been almost 8 years since Christopher went missing. Has there ever been any signs that anything of his belongings were found? Was his bank account ever used? Anything like that? Any clues to show, or has he just basically disappeared from the face of the earth?
He just disappeared. And he had a little bank account, but there was no activity, on that or anything. And to be truthful, I guess they got his cell phone. And, I heard rumors about that the cell phone was never found. So I don't know. It's just been but no belongings or, anything like that.
Well, it's been 8 years and been no answers and no big clues, and the person they want to talk to in that truck has never been found. But there was something more recently that was, perhaps good news, was that a reward was offered for $20,000 in your son's case. Is that reward still active? And can you tell us a little bit about that reward?
Well, my son Michael offered $5,000, but I guess the state boys offered $20,000. So, I'm not 100% sure about any of that.
Is the reward still out there and active, though? Someone could collect that if they came forward with information?
I suppose so, yeah.
Yeah. Well, hopefully people would do the right thing and help your family out and come forward if they had information. But sometimes you never know. Money talks, and that inspires some people to do something. So hopefully if there's anyone out there listening that has information, they'll do the right thing and come forward. Are there any Are there any Facebook pages or websites or anything like that set up for Christopher's case?
Oh, yes.
Can you tell us what some of them are called or where people can find them?
They're Missing Christopher Douthat. It's Douthat. And Missing Christopher Douthat, that's on Facebook.
And people can learn more about his case or follow it or maybe provide information if they have it?
Yes.
Yeah, and we'll be able to include that in the show notes, and hopefully people, if they have information or they want to learn more about it, they'll share it on their social media. They can visit that Facebook page. It sounds like you're really staying active. You're not giving up on Chris's case. We won't either. We want to help you get the word out that he's still missing and help you get to the bottom of finding out what happened to him. I hope that you do get some answers and after 8 years, I can't imagine how tough it's been on you. So thank you once again for joining us to walk us through his case and hoping for the best outcome for you.
I want to tell you how hard this is on people. Having a missing loved one, so maybe people can slightly begin to understand what this is for someone who has a missing loved one. I cry all the time, and every single day is such an enormous struggle. And I live by myself, and it's hard because while I do have people around that care, I still spend a lot of time, if not the vast majority of my time, thinking about Christopher, and I just wonder so many things. Because at this point in time, I pretty much know he's deceased. And it's so difficult. So difficult because I don't want to think of him as deceased. But I think of so many things. And I think to myself, did he suffer? And I'll ask myself, did he feel much pain? And these things play in my mind over and over every day. And I sure do hope if they cracked him over his skull with a baseball bat or something, or stabbed him with some kind of blade, he didn't suffer. And I hope it was one single shot to the skull if he is dead. And the reason I say that is because I pray he didn't suffer a long, horrible death. But I still keep the hope alive one day he will be found alive. And I have a hard time coping, a struggle to cope. And the only joy I get in my life is from spending time with my other son, Michael.
Well, it sounds like you've got a really good son, but at the same time, I know you're missing your other son, and I hope that you do find out somehow what happened to him, and as you put it, so you can get closure. And hopefully, if someone did harm him, they're brought to justice too, and they don't do this to someone else.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Missing Persons. If you can provide any information to help solve the case we discussed in this episode, please contact the appropriate authorities.
If you enjoy this podcast, please take a moment to tell your friends about Missing Persons and invite them to listen to the show. Word of mouth will help us grow and bring these cases to a larger audience. You can also help us by taking a moment to rate and review Missing Persons on the platform you're listening to us now on.
We'd like to tell you a little bit about our Patreon program. If you visit patreon.com/missingpodcast, you can sign up to help this podcast through ongoing monthly support. As a thank you, we'll give you an on-air shout-out, a thank you card and sticker, plus you'll get early access to ad-free episodes of the show and any bonus content.
Your Patreon support also goes towards helping the missing, because every dollar that we earn through Patreon will be split with charlieproject.org, the wonderful website that's been sharing information about so many missing persons cases for years. We hope you'll consider supporting the show. Just a reminder that new episodes of Missing Persons air every other Saturday. If you want to find us on social media, you can search Facebook for Missing Persons Podcast. And we're also on Twitter with the handle @missing_pod. And of course, you can find us on our website, missingpersonspodcast.net. As we wrap up this episode, we'd like to play a preview of a true crime podcast we think you'll like. It's called Misdirectical. Be sure to give it a listen. On behalf of Jess Betancourt, this is Mike Morford saying thanks, and we'll see you next time on Missing Persons.
Hey, I'm Lynn, and this is my co-host, JP.
Hey there, we're Misdirectical, and we love a good mystery. Oh, right, it's... Each week, we comb through a mystery and its theories and discuss some of our own.
That's right. We give original thoughts on mysteries around the world, large or small.
Murder, mayhem, aliens, or the bizarre.
Tune in every Tuesday wherever you listen to podcasts.
Missing Persons is produced under the name AbJack Entertainment by Mike Morford and Jessica Betancourt. It's hosted by Mike Morford and Jessica Betancourt, with writing and research by Jessica Betancourt and editing by Mike Morford. Be sure to listen every other Saturday for an all-new episode of Missing Persons.